All right. So what we talked about right now was transferring all of the rights is a fee simple. That means I've transferred them all in some form, either all of them or some condition or all that. It is entirely possible to not transfer all of the rights. This is a concept that most people like, blows their mind. The most common one you will run into is what's called a life estate and a life tenant. I actually have seen this one time in my career. A life estate is when a person transfers all of the rights either through a sale, or he could give it away, but he doesn't transfer the right of disposition to that person. That person got all of the rights. They can paint it purple under their control. They can go out and get it mortgaged. They have the right to be on it. They have the right to be left alone from third-party intervention. They just cannot sell it. They can't give it away. They can't lease it out. None of it. It is a life estate. The right of disposition was not given to them. On your chart, you will see there are two types of life estates. A conventional life estate actually deals with a human being's life, where legal life estate is a law, and we're going to get to it here in a minute. But a conventional life estate actually deals with a person. All right? And there are two people that we can use. Let me give you the example and you'll see what I'm talking about. Suppose a rich father wants his son to have a house, but the son's a lazy, no good, so-and-so, whatever. So the dad gives the boy a house, but he wants the house to stay in the family, so he doesn't give the boy the right to get rid of it. He gives the boy a life estate. As long as the boy is alive, he has and is the owner of that property. He can treat it just like you guys imagine an owner would. Paints it purple, has parties, does whatever he wants. He has the right to be there. He just can't get rid of the house. That right was retained by the rich dad. And upon the death, this person's called a life tenant. They use the word tenant here. While he's alive, he owns the house. I hate giving that word tenant because then most of you start thinking it's a lease. No, the old man doesn't own the house anymore. The kid owns the house. He just didn't get the full glass. All right? Oh, and one other thing I just want to tell you. Once I pour something out, you guys can't pour it back in. So if I sell it with a fee simple defeasible to you, you can't turn around and sell it fee simple absolute. You didn't get all the powers, you can't sell all the powers. The best you can sell is what I gave you. Everybody understand that? Might make logic sense, but I just want to make sure we covered it. So if I only give you 90% of the powers, when you go to sell it, you can only sell 90%. You can't sell 100, you didn't get it. Okay? Back to this. I hate using the word tenant because most of you start thinking it's a lease. It's not. It's an ownership. He's just called a life tenant. Now, upon his death, that's a knife. I know I'm going to get in trouble one day for that. Here's going to need their safe space. Upon his death, the property reverts back to the original owner. Don't ask. We'll get there. Or, depending on how he gave it to him, it could go to some other person, depending on what the original life estate person decides he wants to do with it. If it goes back to the original person, he has what's called a Reversionary interest. What's reversionary? What's revert mean? Revert means go back to, right? So if the father gives the son a life estate and the son dies, the property goes back to the dad has what's called a reversionary interest. That reversionary interest is willable, once again. If the dad dies in that time, whoever he names in his will would get that interest. All right? I see a lot of deer in the headlight looks because we haven't even got to the confusing one yet. If the dad decides it wants to go to someone other than himself, like maybe a younger brother, the younger brother has what's called a remainderman's interest or a remainder interest.
I thought the original guy's not dead yet.
Has nothing to do with him. The life estate transfers upon the death of the life tenant, the boy. So dad gives the house to the boy as a life estate. It's the boy's death that triggers the movement of the house. So as boy gets killed, that house now goes to his younger brother. The younger brother would have a remainderman's interest in that property. If the house reverted back to the dad, hey, I'll take it back and I'm going to do something else with it, I have a reversionary interest, or the dad has a reversionary, it would revert back to the original person. All right? But it's, yes, once it reverts back to me, I have all the rights. And once it goes to the remainderman, he would have all the rights. All right?
If the original person chooses, correct? Can he choose to leave out?
He could. But now you're into a second level of life estates.
Both kids are losers, you know? Just
Yeah. Yeah.
The original guy gave him 90% of the glass. He dies. The other guy's dead. It goes to the remainderman, and he gets 100% or 90%.
The remainderman would get 100% and get all the powers. Or if it comes back to the dad, he would then get 100%. Right. As if he never gave it up. No, he owns it.
Okay, what if he gave life tenant powers to his son when both grandfather and father are alive?
Okay, I missed the question there. If the dad owns the house and he wants to keep the house in the family, he doesn't want his son to sell it for drugs or whatever. So he gives the house to his son as a life estate. So the son now owns the house. The only thing is he doesn't have fee simple because the dad did not give him the right of disposition. The boy has the right of possession, he has the right of enjoyment, he has the right of control, he has the right of exclusion. He just can't get rid of the house. He can't sell it, he can't give it away, none of that. That right was not even given to him. All right?
Does he get it if the guy dies?
Does who get it? The dad kept that right.
Right. If the dad dies, does the guy get the right?
No.
What would happen?
This would go in his will, and that's what I said, it's a willable interest. The dad has now a will written that says, I want my brother to inherit my estate. So now the brother has the interest of disposition back. Right, it's up to him with what he does with it. And that's what I was telling you. There was a girl in class that had one of those interests. It went back to her grandfather. He died because the church has been there 80 years. So when the grandfather died, he willed that interest to his daughter, which was this girl's mother. Then when that girl's mother died, she willed it to this girl. So this girl's into the second generation of this interest willing down here. But the church is still working on it. All right? Got it? Because it's about to get tricky. It is up to the remainderman to keep an eye on this guy, by the way. No one asks that question. Someone typically does. Because this guy legally cannot, the legal term is called waste the property. He can't let it go into disrepair. He can't let it get the tax lien put on it and all that. If he does, they can go in and force a court order to move that property even before he's dead. That's typically a question someone asks. So the life tenant cannot waste the property. All right? About 5 years ago, up at 39th and just north of Crown Hill Cemetery, had a guy call us and said, I want you to list my double. My mother just passed away. The double is my inheritance, and it actually has a tenant in the other side. I'm like, sweet. Get the money, you got a tenant, it's going to be a property. Yeah. We run title work, and guess what? The tenant on the other side of the property was a much better friend to his mother than he thought. Because the mother had left the neighbor tenant, which was an elderly male, a life estate of the house and didn't even tell her son. So the other guy owned the property now, and she named her son as the remainderman on the life estate. So basically the old man now got to live in the house, and he owned it, so he could actually rent out the side the woman lived in. And then when he died, it went to the kid. I actually have run into this one time. All right? So it's out there. All right? Got it? Good. Now let's do another one. This is called an ordinary life estate. It's conventional because it deals with a true human. But under the conventional, there are two types of humans. One is an ordinary human, which means the person who got the benefit, it is their death that triggers the movement. There is a second type of human called a pure autre. Pure autre. See, I told you. English as a second language gets screwed up because now we're into French all of a sudden. Pure autre means by the life of another. What happens in this particular case, the house gets given to one person, but it's the death of someone else that triggers the movement of that house. Let me give you the best example in the world. I was involved in one of these, and it'll make clear sense. Let's go back. Father has a mentally handicapped child who can't own real estate. So what he does is he gives the kid's caretaker a life estate, pure autre, and names the boy as the trigger mechanism. So what ends up happening is this. The dad gives the house to the nurse, but it's the death of the young boy that triggers the movement. If the boy dies and the nurse is still alive, she still loses the house. If the nurse dies, they just get another one to replace her because it's the boy's life that triggers the movement, not the one who received the benefit. All right? So in an ordinary life estate, go back, the one who received the benefit, it's their death that triggers the movement. In a pure autre life based on another, the person who received it has nothing to do with the movement. It's the death of a other person over here that triggers the movement of the house. So one's an ordinary life estate, the other's a pure autre by the life of another. The best example is the one I gave you. It's the young child. That's who the dad is protecting. And as long as the kid's alive, he wants that kid to have a house. But he can't control the house, can't take care of it, do that. So he gives it to a caretaker, and the caretaker takes care of the kid, keeps him safe, and does all that. And as long as the kid's alive, the caretaker owns the house. Then when the kid dies, the caretaker loses his house, and it either goes back to the father in a reversionary or to someone else as a remainderman. I know your question. Why a caretaker? Or what happened to the caretaker?
Why would he do that?
He-
Because he might be dying? The father. Why would the father?
He could be. Could be an elderly father with a 10 or 12-year-old kid. And he wants to make sure the kid is taken care of. So he buys him a house, or even the house that he's going to live in, or however it works. But he doesn't, and I don't want to use the word trust is the right word, but he doesn't want to have to depend on the kid to take care of himself. So there's a caretaker, and the caretaker receives the ownership. Typically, before anybody asks, it's a trust run by an attorney who hires the caretaker. That way, if the caretaker quits, the trust just hires another caretaker or nurse, and then it's the trust that receives the ownership.
I was going to say, I have some friends who have he was a head injury victim, and they did just that, and they did it because they wanted him to feel like he was living independently.
Right. Because, see, to transfer real estate in Indiana, you got to have sufficient mental capacity to understand the ramifications of the outcome. A lot of times mentally handicapped children cannot, so they can't own real estate. So you would give it to someone else to hold it and owner it to make sure this kid always has a house.
So then that nurse is responsible for the upkeep of the home?
Yeah, she owns it. I'm using a very simplistic because I don't want to get into the whole thing of it's a trust taken care of by an attorney who hires all these people, and it's just easier to explain it as it's a person. Okay. It's a nurse. But the nurse owns the property, just like a regular, because they transfer the ownership just in like the nurse just doesn't have the right of disposition. And when the kid dies, the nurse loses the house, even if she's still alive, because it's not her life that transfers the movement or triggers. The trigger mechanism is pure autre, somebody else. Okay? And I think that example is the one actually, the consumption of alcohol, that's the one we talked about. Remainderment or remainder interest or remainderment. The other type of life estate is what's called a legal life estate. There are the dowry right, the courtesy right, and the homestead. Indiana practices all three of these. You guys remember what a dowry is? A dowry is what a father used to give away to his daughter's suitor to get rid of her, as a wedding gift. All right? That was the dowry. Courtesy is just the opposite. What this says is this: whatever the wife owns, the husband owns. Whatever the husband owns, the wife owns. The wife has an interest in the husband's property. When the husband dies, the wife accumulates the property automatically. When the wife dies, the husband accumulates the property automatically.
Dower means the woman and courtesy.
Yeah. Dowry is the man's interest in the wife's property. Courtesy is the woman's interest in the man's property. All right? Because a dowry used to be given away to the daughter's suitor. In the days of the knights, they would give a dowry away. We changed that word as we came to America, and we call that a bribe now. This happened several years ago with my father and my mom. Once my father passed away, my mother now owned all of Dad's stuff because of these two laws. The third law is called the homestead law. The homestead law is a legal life estate, and it protects the owners from, listen up, unsecured creditors. What's an unsecured creditor? Credit card. The Homestead Act or the Homestead Exemption does not protect you from your creditors that are secured, like the mortgage. All right? If you haven't paid your mortgage and the bank comes after you, this law doesn't protect you because they are a secured creditor. You ponied up your house as security. Visa card, I just signed my name. That's an unsecured creditor. You ever heard Peter Francis Geraci? I can save your home and your car for bank. No shit, Dick Tracy. It's a state law. We can do that. All right? And every state's different. Indiana, it's up to 45,000 is the max right now. Unless it's gone up in the last year. I don't think it has. It will protect the first $45,000 of equity in your property. Texas is completely different. Texas exempts the entire home. Theoretically, you can own a $3 million home in Texas free and clear, file bankruptcy, and not have to sell the home because it's protected. Everybody's got to live somewhere. They won't take your home. Indiana, we protect the first $45,000, up to $45,000. All right? So that's called the dowry, the curtsy, and the Homestead Act. That is the legal life estate. So, back and looking at that chart, you got fee simple, absolute, all five powers. Fee simple, all five powers, absolute in their highest degree. Then we take some powers away. You got a defeasance there, condition subsequent. Then we don't even give away all five powers. The life estate, we don't give them the right of disposition. Then we have a legal life estate, which only deals with possessions between owners. And homestead, which deals with the primary residence and the owner of the people, the owner of family, all right? So those are an estate in land. Any question there?